Hey folks, it's Chris with the Human Project. We're continuing our series talking about emotions. In this episode, we're going to talk about emotional vocabulary. How do we build a better vocabulary for ourselves so that we are clearer on what we're talking about and what we're actually feeling and experiencing for emotions? So listen to Mark and I dissect this. We talk about things like crayons, missing tires, and other fun things in this episode. So take a listen, let us know what you think. Hey Mark.
Hello, Chris.
How you doing?
I am again jubilant.
Oh no. Not this again.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Until this moment, I was great.
I was great until recently. No, I'm doing good. I'm excited that we get to do another series. I think we've tried one of these before, but it was only a two-parter. This one's, I think, 4 parts is what we're planning on doing.
Yeah.
We'll see if that's actually how it ends up.
17-parter.
We probably could do a 17-parter on like connections or emotion or any of that stuff. But yeah, so last time we spent time talking about emotions. Do you want to try and give a quick recap, or you want me to give a quick recap?
You're great at recaps. Why don't you do recaps?
Okay, cool. I will do that. We talked about emotions as signals, helping us see that they're not good or bad. They just are. They're something we experience. And so it's like a check engine light. Helps us be able to see what's going on under the hood. And then why talk about them? Because they're really healthy for us to be able to experience God-experienced emotions. We experience emotions. It's how we were created. It's how we were designed. And allowing ourselves to feel and consider what's actually going on in our lives.
Yes.
There you go.
Iglesia. Yeah.
What's iglesia?
Church.
Oh, okay.
And the only reason I know that is because of Spanish vocabulary, where it's drilled into my head.
See, I guess I think I've been taking too much Greek because I hear ecclesia.
Naranja.
Just the gathering. Naranja?
Naranja.
Naranja, is that orange?
Yeah.
There you go. You're getting Spanish lessons.
Jarrito. You know what that one is.
Emotional vocabulary.
Oh, okay, yes.
Not Spanish vocabulary.
Oh, very similar though. Like what words do we use to describe what we feel?
Yeah.
You know, as a word nerd, that's a super interesting area to consider.
Word nerd alert!
Word nerd alert. First one of this episode. Because just what I said in that simple sentence is actually pretty deep and challenging. How do we describe with words what we are feeling? It's a not intangible thing. It's an intangible thing. And we're trying to describe it with specific words. And that, you know, I'll say like, I'm colorblind, partially colorblind, right? So this naturally raises questions for those of us who overthink things to go like, so when I say blue and you say blue, are we experiencing blue the same way?
Oh, I love thinking about that. That is such a mind bender. That's one of those like hashtag shower thoughts.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, I see what I see as blue on the wall here.
And
do you
call
experience
it blue too?
What I see as green and call it purple?
Maybe.
Yeah, it's so weird.
I think we discover that type of difference though, because we'd be calling the same thing different things. But yet we both look at this wall and say, it's some shade of blue.
Yeah.
But do I experience blue the same way you do? Or do I just know to label it that way because of training, basically?
Yeah.
So I think the same thing, it's even harder because this is a real wall here with a real color pigment painted on it. The way we experience feelings, I think, is far more challenging to describe. So that's really intriguing to me to explore that. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's hard for us to have a good emotional vocabulary, a healthy, I should say, emotional vocabulary, is because it's intangible stuff.
Yeah.
And I can't even look at the same thing you're looking at, right? Feeling, really, to recognize that when you're describing it that way, it's the same emotion I mean. How does that hit you? Is that similar to what you think of with emotional vocabulary, or is there something different you think of?
What was most helpful for me with emotional vocabulary is like There's an image that floated around the internet a while ago, and it was in burgundy and all of this, and guys are like red, and like a big old capture and all these things. And I think there's this tendency for people that haven't developed an emotional vocabulary to be like the male side equation of that. Of I feel good, bad, happy, sad, angry, any of these.
That's it. That's all you got. Those are the only cards you can play, so to speak, in emotional vocabulary.
And I think, especially for men, like the only acceptable emotions for a man to feel a lot of times are happy and angry. Sad, not acceptable.
Right.
And that's weird. I don't know. I that's changing. We're doing ourselves a disservice by not allowing there to be gradients. When we think about different emotions, saying I'm happy versus I'm jubilant.
Yeah.
I know that's one that's
Who
not
would
going
ever
to
say that.
Yeah. Who would? But that's one that doesn't generally enter our vocabulary.
Yeah.
So we're like, that's kind of weird to say. Emotional vocabulary things that come up for you, like different gradients.
I like the gradients of the intensity maybe of a color. So to feel a little happy, I might be pleased. Overjoyed, I am ecstatic. I'm like, wow. We have other words to say these things. I'm over the moon. I mean, there's a bunch of different phrases we can use, but you can see there's a whole range even of just happy that we can express.
Yeah. Yeah. Or allowing ourselves. So we talked about them as signals the first time. Like, what's the depth that we're experiencing something, I think is the important thing with gradients. To me, it's like graduating from the 12 crayon box to like the 64 crayon box.
We're going all in on the color analogy for emotions because it works so well.
It paints a really good richness of a picture. A lot clearer of a picture than just like 8-bit color.
Yeah.
Where you're able to see things clearer and less fuzzy and get better clarity around the emotions that you're feeling. So better signal, better indicators around what's actually happening.
Yeah. I'm going to go all in on that analogy. Because being 50 computer that we had a monochrome monitor.
Okay.
And then we had the 8-bit, you're talking just a few colors basically that can be painted on the screen. But that was exciting to go from monochrome. It was amber, by the way, the one that we had. Monochrome, and you could try and paint things, but you had kind of use your imagination to see things to just a few colors, which got a lot better. And then just the increasing fine points, right, of the sizes of the pixels and the colors and the variations. The difference is stunning of what you can depict and understand. And so I love that analogy. We can understand ourselves as we're growing our emotional vocabulary, the picture of what's going on inside us underneath the surface and the signals we're receiving become much richer. So our understanding of our whole lives is much richer when we have a larger emotional vocabulary.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out, is thinking about them even richer. Let's give some examples for people that might not be familiar with what we're talking about here. I think like one that comes to mind for me is like fear.
Yeah.
It's been a rough year personally for me, so this is one I'm very acquainted with right now. Like I think allowing myself to see the depth of fear that I was having with some things that were coming up in my life versus like, oh yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant about the future. No, I was like much deeper than that. It was much deeper than that.
Right.
And allowing myself to actually see what's going on painted a much clearer picture. I would say I was, at some point there was panic about the future. And that's just a much deeper emotional thing than just like uneasy or something like that.
So understanding what's going on underneath the surface for you, the difference between, what was the first one you said, uneasy or something like that? The difference between a signal that says uneasy versus one that says, say, terrified, panicked, something in that much more amped up.
It's the difference between your tire pressure gauge showing that it's low and holy crap, you don't have a tire.
Okay.
I think What's helpful about that is it gives you a better signal and you're able to take better action on it. So like fill the tire up versus go get a tire.
Yeah. And the urgency,
Yeah.
I think as well, like fill the tire up. It would be good to do that as soon as possible. You could also wait till tomorrow if you absolutely had to. You don't have a tire. You're now. Like
Sure.
It's dangerous immediately if you're not going to deal with that.
Yeah. So I think that's the why of why to build an emotional vocabulary, why that's important.
So it's important for us to have emotional vocabulary and to grow that. So what would be some things you would recommend to people to try and take those steps to expand their emotional vocabulary?
Yeah, I liked the analogy you used earlier about it being like Spanish. And thankfully, as a Spanish teacher, I had a native speaker. Like she grew up in Mexico and was able to teach us things. That's how I know corazón de pollo, sweetheart, which actually means chicken heart.
Odd.
But I think the same thing applies anytime you're learning new words, anytime you're building any kind of vocabulary. Is like, just be curious about it and see what else is out there that can describe that. Like, this is going to sound super nerdy coming from word nerds. But
Word nerd alert, second one.
Something like a thesaurus.
Okay.
Is really helpful. Like if you're struggling to communicate something or think through like, what do I actually feel about this? A thesaurus? Well,
Sure.
Motion wheels. Yep, that's a good one.
Yeah. I think, or like what we have at EMI, a feeling words list, something like that. The reason why I like that specifically is because if I'm trying to find the emotion in here and I can compare different words, as you said, they each have their own like flavor or scent to them, something like that, or implication would be a more formal way of saying it, that I can go, well, it's kind of like that. Okay, so I know I'm getting close, but it's not quite as, strong, or maybe it's a little more, and then I'm trying to hunt my way to get closer. I can almost compare 2 or 3 emotion words and go like, yeah, not that. Okay, yeah, more like this, but that's not exactly it. And that's helping me understand myself as I'm trying to wrestle through that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another good launching point on top of that we'll talk about in the next episode is doing that in community. Like having shared understanding, having someone look into that. We'll get there. We'll talk about that.
A lot of richness. Can't wait to have that conversation.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
But I love the feeling wheels of being able to see like what's different, help you be able to place. And like what color crayon am I looking for?
Yes.
How am I going to paint this picture?
Lean into that color analogy still even yet more because I have some color blindness. That is actually how I differentiate colors. So I think there's a power in that analogy here. If I am kind of like emotionally colorblind in some ways, right? That some of the same tools can help. So for example, I'm partially red-green colorblind, which means I have trouble seeing some reds, especially when they're in the more subtle end of things. The difference between...
You are in the wrong city to not be seeing reds.
I know. I'm so sorry. Ba-doom. Thank you very much. We'll be here all week. But the difference between blue and purple is red. So to me, a lot of purples, unless it is a really, really purpley purple, look blue. I can't tell that it's purple. It looks blue to me, unless you place it next to a clear blue or a clear red, or a really strong purple, and then I can tell because it's next to, like it has to be next to.
Yeah.
And then I can compare it. Blue and purple, a foot apart. I'll probably call them both blue. You put them, just move them next to each other. I'll go, oh, blue and purple, just because I can compare the two. And so I think that's
if it's helpful, we did the same thing when we were picking paint colors.
Yeah.
They were really, really close together. If they were on top of each other, I could tell the difference.
Okay.
If they were like 6 inches apart, I could not tell the difference.
So it works for non-colorblind people too. That's great.
Yeah. Just telling you I'm with you.
I'm there, man. From an emotional perspective, that's the kind of power I'm talking about, of being able to pull different words, compare them, and look at them close next to each other, so to speak, and compare them to what I'm experiencing right now or experienced inside of me, how I'm feeling.
Yeah. And again, the benefit of that, the reason why it's worth that effort. One, as we talked about in the first episode, emotions are important.
Yeah.
And then clarity of emotions helps take it to a whole new level of being able to differentiate between like, I'm mildly amused to I am ecstatic.
Yeah.
Like that helps give you a clearer picture so that you can take better and more appropriate action. So I love that, being able to compare and contrast.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Same thing we said at the end of the last episode applies here, just as an encouragement to keep leaning in to emotions, that there is richness here. God gave us emotions, like you said, so there's something here that he put here for a purpose, for reasons. And it helps us understand what's going on underneath the surface of our lives. And that is definitely worth leaning further into, because the more that we can understand that and interact with that, then we'll be healthier and fulfilling more of what God intended and designed for us as humans and as each individual that we are. So it's worth pushing into that.
Yeah. And where we're going to go with the next episode is, how do we do this in community? How do we do this with other people? And this is, I think, the heart of what we really care about, is helping other people see what's going on, because we all have blind spots. So we're going to dive into that in the next episode, and then we'll talk about how do we help raise these emotions so that we are dealing with them in a healthy way.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in today. This podcast is made possible by myself, Chris Conlin, Mark Wavle, and our lead editor, Derek Donley. We are a crowd-funded nonprofit. Most of what we do is free because of your generous support. Thank you for joining us on our mission to bring 1 million lives closer to fullness in God's design. To support us financially or to learn more, visit humanproject.us.